August 16, 1943, Sicily. Two columns of soldiers pushed relentlessly along the narrow, winding roads leading toward the city of Messina. Smoke curled into the hot Mediterranean sky, marking the progress of two rival forces racing toward the same prize. Each commander urged his troops onward, driven not merely by the need to defeat entrenched enemy defenders, but by a far more personal rivalry, a desire to claim the city first, to capture glory that would forever mark their place in history. Exhaustion clung to every man, the weight of weeks of continuous marching and skirmishes etched into their faces. On one road, a general leaned forward in his command vehicle, shouting directions through the dusty air, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The roar of engines, the clatter of boots, and the distant crackle of gunfire filled the landscape as soldiers strained to maintain formation. Under the oppressive August sun, around him, officers relayed orders with precision, trying to anticipate obstacles that could slow the advance. Every hill, every bend in the road, every stretch of open terrain held the potential for a disaster, a concealed enemy force, a destroyed bridge, a sudden ambush. Yet the general pressed onward, his mind focused on one unshakable objective: reaching Messina before his rival. On a parallel road, another commander faced a similar struggle. He guided his troops with meticulous care, conscious of every tactical advantage and risk. Unlike his counterparts, he weighed each decision carefully, calculating supply lines, the morale of his men, and the unpredictable Sicilian terrain. Rolling hills dotted with olive trees and vineyards provided cover, but also slowed progress. He knew that a single mistake could cost him not only the city, but the lives of hundreds. Despite his caution, an unspoken tension gnawed at him, the knowledge that victory might slip through his fingers, simply because his rival was more daring, more willing to gamble. Messina itself loomed as a symbolic prize. Its capture would signify mastery over Sicily and validate months of grueling preparation and sacrifice. Soldiers from both armies knew that who arrived first would claim the narrative of victory. Flags would rise over the city, banners would be waved in triumph, and reports would flood the newspapers and broadcast stations. Whoever arrived second would be relegated to a supporting role, a footnote in someone else's story. The stakes were immense, yet intangible glory, recognition, and the subtle but powerful currents of professional rivalry. By the evening of August 16, the 3rd Division of the American-led force reached the outskirts of Messina. They moved swiftly, cutting through the last pockets of enemy resistance, their boots pounding the roads slick with dust and sweat. Exhausted soldiers pushed forward, despite fatigue and the relentless heat, driven by adrenaline and the urgency of their mission. The defenders, though determined, were spread thin and increasingly demoralized, unable to hold back the relentless advance. By nightfall, the Americans had entered the city, securing key intersections and raising their flag over central squares. Victory, hard-earned and immediate, belonged to them. Hours later, the British-led force arrived. The streets were already marked by the banners of their rivals. The city, once a blank canvas of strategic possibility, had been claimed. Soldiers stepped cautiously into streets now dominated by an unfamiliar enemy, taking care not to provoke conflict. Officers met with the American command, exchanging formal greetings tinged with subtle resentment. The first commander, triumphant yet respectful, extended gestures of courtesy, performing a theatrical acknowledgement of the Americans' achievement. His rival, frustrated but composed, understood the message. The race had been lost, and the glory captured by someone else. To fully grasp the tension between these two commanders, one must consider their backgrounds. One had recently emerged from a string of notable victories on the continent. He was disciplined, methodical, and acutely aware of public perception. His reputation had been carefully cultivated, and he carried himself with an air of inevitability, believing that his decisions, no matter how cautious, were inherently superior. Every action, every advance, was documented and broadcast, reinforcing the image of an infallible leader. The other commander, though equally skilled, thrived on audacity and rapid action. He had transformed disorganized troops into disciplined units through sheer force of will, turning hesitant or inexperienced soldiers into a cohesive fighting force in a matter of weeks. He preferred aggressive tactics, valuing speed and initiative over caution. While his methods sometimes drew criticism for their risk, his results were undeniable. Rapid advances, decisive victories, and the capture of strategic objectives that others deemed unattainable. The disparity in styles created inevitable friction. American officers often bristled under British oversight, resentful of the perceived interference and the allocation of resources. Meanwhile, the British commander, confident in his experience and careful planning, viewed the audacious tactics of his rival as reckless, a potential threat to the overall campaign. The race to Messina magnified these tensions, turning every decision, every tactical maneuver, into a contest of pride and strategy. As night fell over Messina, the exhausted troops of both sides consolidated their positions. Fires flickered in the streets, and the scent of smoke mingled with the salty Mediterranean air. Soldiers repaired equipment, treated the wounded, and prepared for the inevitable counterattacks that would follow. Commanders convened, reviewing maps and dispatches, their thoughts oscillating between strategic priorities and the silent competition that had defined the day. Despite the chaos, the outcome was clear. One side had claimed the city, and with it, a significant, if fleeting, victory. In the end, the race to Messina was more than a tactical maneuver, it was a story of ambition, rivalry, and human determination. It highlighted the tension between caution and audacity, methodical planning and daring improvisation, and it foreshadowed the challenges to come, where the stakes would be higher, the terrain more treacherous, and the cost of victory measured not just in territory, but in lives, legacy, and the relentless march of history. August 17, 1943. The city of Messina had barely cooled from the clash of boots and the roar of engines, before the consequences of the rivalry became painfully clear. Soldiers, already exhausted from days of relentless marching and fighting, were pushed further as their commanders sought to consolidate victory and assert dominance. The American-led force that had reached Messina first now faced the dual challenge of securing the city and managing the resentment of a British-led army that had arrived hours too late. Tension simmered beneath the surface, a quiet friction between two command styles that had been forged in starkly different theaters of war. The British commander, meticulous and strategic, insisted on holding certain key positions, believing they were essential for the long-term stability of the campaign. He argued for measured advances, careful fortification, and constant reconnaissance to avoid unnecessary losses. His officers supported him, noting the precariousness of Sicilian terrain. Steep hills, narrow roads, and scattered towns made rapid movement perilous. Every hilltop was a potential ambush site, every crossroads a possible death trap. Yet his caution, while tactically sound, was increasingly frustrating to the Americans, whose aggressive commander pressed for immediate action. The American-led force, having demonstrated remarkable speed and audacity, was restless. The commander, aware of the limits of his troops' endurance, urged continuous movement toward the next objective, Palermo. His soldiers, disciplined and highly motivated, responded with determination. Yet they too felt the strain of fatigue, the burn of sun on their backs, and the constant reminder that every hour wasted was another hour in which the British forces could reclaim glory. Orders were relayed with urgency, maps were constantly updated, and scouts raced ahead to identify both enemy positions and routes suitable for rapid advancement. The rivalry between the commanders extended beyond simple competition for physical territory. It infiltrated strategy meetings and operational planning, creating subtle yet critical conflicts that rippled through the chain of command. Officers found themselves caught between loyalty to their own commander and the practical need to cooperate with allies. Supplies had to be divided, reinforcements coordinated, and communication maintained under the intense pressure of advancing and consolidating multiple objectives simultaneously. Small disagreements over tactics, often trivial in isolation, now carried outsized significance. A delayed message, a misread map, or a hesitation at a crossroads could determine the outcome of an entire city or region. In the midst of this, enemy forces were not idle. German units, well trained and strategically positioned, had begun to recover from earlier setbacks. They fortified key points, established defensive positions, and monitored the movements of both the American and British armies. Their resistance, though weakened, was methodical and precise. Every hill they held, every checkpoint they controlled, slowed the forward march of the Allied forces. The Sicilian terrain amplified these effects. Narrow roads funneled vehicles into predictable paths, and natural barriers allowed defenders to concentrate firepower effectively. The rivalry between the Allied commanders meant that opportunities to exploit weaknesses in the enemy's lines were sometimes delayed or overlooked, as each side focused on demonstrating superiority rather than coordinating fully. By late afternoon, tensions escalated further. The American-led troops pushed toward Palermo with relentless urgency, determined to seize the city and secure the next strategic position. Their commander issued orders that stretched supply lines, risked exposure to ambushes, and demanded near impossible feats of endurance from already weary soldiers. Meanwhile, the British forces moved more deliberately, fortifying captured positions, securing roads, and attempting to stabilize their gains. The gap between the two armies widened not geographically, but in speed, style, and tactical philosophy. Incidents of miscommunication multiplied. Scouts reported enemy movement along critical routes, but the transmission of these reports was often delayed by bureaucratic hesitation or disagreement over interpretation. A strategic roadblock near a narrow pass delayed the British forces, allowing German defenders to regroup. The Americans, moving swiftly on parallel routes, occasionally bypassed these obstacles, capturing small towns and villages with minimal resistance, but leaving behind key supply lines vulnerable. The commanders' rivalry, a mix of personal pride and contrasting strategy, had transformed what should have been a coordinated effort into a tense balancing act between cooperation and competition. Amid the chaos, both commanders understood that the campaign's ultimate success would hinge on a delicate combination of audacity, endurance, and timing. They watched each other warily, measuring every decision against not only the enemy's actions, but also the rival commanders' anticipated moves. Each victory, each territorial gain, became a statement, a demonstration of skill, speed, and authority. The stakes extended beyond Sicily itself. They were matters of legacy, recognition, and professional reputation in the broader theatre of war. As the sun set over Messina and the surrounding hills, the human cost of the rivalry became evident. Soldiers staggered from exhaustion, medics struggled to treat the wounded under makeshift conditions, and supply officers scrambled to maintain essential resources. Every tactical decision carried immediate consequences. A delayed artillery strike, a mismanaged convoy, or a fatigued unit could reverse hard-won gains. Yet despite the tension, the relentless pace of operations continued. The American-led force pressed toward Palermo, their energy fueled by ambition and adrenaline, while the British forces fortified Messina, preparing for the inevitable counterattacks and ensuring that their claim to strategic relevance remained intact. By nightfall, the stage was set for the next critical phase of the campaign. The cities, roads, and hills of Sicily bore the marks of two competing visions of warfare, one driven by bold, rapid action, the other by careful planning and methodical control. The clash of these approaches would define not only the immediate success or failure of operations, but also the broader understanding of leadership, strategy, and human endurance in the crucible of war. In the darkness, both commanders reflected on the fragile balance of victory and defeat. One contemplated how audacity had carried him to Messina first, while the other measured how disciplined, strategic control could ensure long-term success despite initial setbacks. Neither could ignore the lessons of the day. In war, personal rivalry could be as potent a force as the enemy itself, shaping outcomes, influencing decisions, and testing the limits of both men and their armies. June 6, 1944. The coast of Normandy, France, was alive with chaos, noise, and anticipation. Thousands of troops, tanks, and aircraft converged on the beaches under a sky that promised both hope and destruction. The massive Allied invasion was underway, a culmination of months of planning and preparation. Yet beneath the surface of military coordination, the rivalry between the two commanders whose styles had collided in Sicily continued to shape the course of the operation. On one side, the methodical, deliberate commander who had emphasized careful planning, fortified positions, and incremental progress sought to maintain strict control over his sector. His forces were organized, disciplined, and heavily supplied, advancing slowly but surely against German defenses. Every landing, every secured position was measured against an overall plan designed to minimize unnecessary casualties. He meticulously checked reports, maintained secure communication lines, and coordinated with air and naval units to ensure that every action reinforced the broader strategy. Meanwhile, the more audacious commander whose forces had previously demonstrated rapid, aggressive advances across Sicily and later France moved at a breakneck pace. He understood that speed could overwhelm the enemy and prevent them from establishing strong defensive positions. His soldiers, though exhausted, were driven by relentless momentum and the knowledge that decisive action could dramatically alter the course of the campaign. Convoys pushed forward, tanks barreled across open fields, and infantry advanced under constant threat, yet propelled by the confidence instilled by their commander's leadership. The contrast between the two approaches created tension both in the field and among higher command. Supply lines for the faster-moving units strained under the pressure of rapid movement, and logistical gaps became glaring weaknesses. Meanwhile, the more cautious forces occasionally stalled, held up by overly cautious officers or complex terrain, giving the enemy opportunities to regroup. Yet despite these challenges, both sides were crucial to the success of the overall invasion. One sought to secure the long-term objective of establishing a stable foothold, while the other aimed to achieve immediate territorial gains and maintain relentless pressure on the enemy. As the days progressed, it became increasingly clear how the rivalry influenced operational decisions. The faster commander pushed his units to seize towns and strategic crossroads before the enemy could reinforce them, often taking calculated risks that could have resulted in disaster. His officers were tasked with improvisation, adjusting plans on the fly to exploit weaknesses in German defenses. Meanwhile, the methodical commander focused on consolidating captured ground, fortifying positions, and coordinating combined arms efforts to neutralize enemy resistance efficiently. Both approaches had merit, yet neither could ignore the other. Coordination was necessary, but pride and the desire for recognition complicated cooperation. The human cost of this dual approach was stark. Soldiers under the audacious commander's orders faced grueling marches, exposed flanks, and rapid redeployment with minimal rest. Medics and supply units struggled to keep pace with the relentless tempo. Conversely, troops under the cautious commander faced extended periods of danger in static positions, subject to sustained artillery fire and counterattacks while waiting for reinforcements or additional orders. Morale fluctuated with success and setbacks, and officers often had to act as mediators to maintain discipline and cohesion amid competing priorities. Amid this chaos, enemy forces proved adaptable and formidable. German commanders, aware of the Allied division's operational patterns, exploited weaknesses and terrain, launching counterattacks where coordination faltered. They observed the contrast between rapid advances and cautious consolidations, and adjusted their defenses accordingly. Strategic points, such as bridges, road junctions, and key towns, became fiercely contested. Every decision whether to push forward aggressively or to fortify defensively carried immediate tactical implications and potential long-term consequences. By mid-June, the pace of operations reached a critical point. The audacious commander's forces had advanced significantly, liberating multiple towns and forcing the enemy to retreat or disperse. His rapid maneuvers disrupted German lines and created opportunities for exploitation. Yet, supply shortages and overextended lines threatened to stall progress, emphasizing the risks inherent in aggressive tactics. Simultaneously, the cautious commander's forces began consolidating key positions, ensuring that captured areas were secure and providing necessary support for flanking and follow-up operations. The interplay between speed and methodical planning defined the operational rhythm, and the outcome of the campaign hinged on the delicate balance between these competing approaches. As weeks passed, media and public perception began to highlight the difference in command styles. Reports praised rapid advances and impressive territorial gains, attributing them to bold leadership and decisiveness. Yet the slower, methodical approach essential for long-term stability received limited attention. The contrast created friction not only among the Allied commanders, but also among political and military leadership, who recognized the importance of both strategies but struggled to reconcile their coexistence. Ultimately, the Normandy campaign demonstrated the complexity of high-level command during a large-scale, multinational operation. Success depended not merely on individual brilliance or brute force, but on the integration of diverse approaches, coordination among units, and the ability to adapt to both terrain and enemy response. The rivalry that had driven the commanders in Sicily now played out on an even larger stage, shaping decisions, influencing outcomes, and leaving a lasting mark on the history of the campaign. By the end of June 1944, the Allied forces had secured multiple objectives, yet the tension between audacity and caution persisted. Each commander's reputation, shaped by previous campaigns and reinforced by ongoing operations, continued to influence decision-making. The Normandy invasion, monumental in scale and significance, became a case study in how leadership styles, personal rivalry, and operational philosophy could profoundly impact the course of war. Soldiers on the ground, unaware of the larger disputes, bore the consequences of strategic choices, facing danger, exhaustion, and relentless pressure as the campaign unfolded. The lessons of Normandy would resonate beyond the immediate theater of war. Speed and aggression could achieve remarkable gains, but without coordination and consolidation, victories could be fragile. Conversely, careful planning ensured long-term stability, yet excessive caution could miss opportunities. In the crucible of battle, the interplay between these forces defined the fate of nations, the survival of soldiers, and the legacies of the commanders themselves. By late summer of 1944, the tide of war in Western Europe had shifted decisively. The Allied armies had established a firm foothold, but the contest between the two commanders, the methodical and the audacious, continued to shape the pace and nature of operations. Both sought the same goal: the defeat of enemy forces and the liberation of occupied territories. Yet their contrasting philosophies, shaped by past experiences and personal ambition, led to both remarkable victories and costly mistakes. In the weeks following the Normandy invasion, the audacious commander pressed his forces with relentless momentum. His armies moved at extraordinary speeds, often covering 40 to 50 kilometers a day through hostile territory. Towns that might have taken weeks to secure under conventional planning fell within days. German defenses were disrupted, supply lines cut, and entire enemy garrisons were forced to surrender. His approach relied on rapid exploitation of weak points, daring maneuvers, and the ability to make real-time tactical decisions. Risk was inherent, but so were the rewards. Meanwhile, the methodical commander continued his systematic approach. He fortified captured positions, ensured secure supply lines, and coordinated combined arms operations. His forces advanced more slowly, but with precision, minimizing unnecessary casualties and consolidating gains. Every decision was measured against a broader strategic plan, designed to create sustainable progress and maintain cohesion among Allied forces. Though his achievements were significant, they often received less attention from the public and press, overshadowed by the daring exploits of his counterpart. The rivalry between the commanders reached a critical point. During the pursuit toward the German frontier, both sought to reach strategic cities, secure key crossings, and position their forces advantageously for the final push into enemy territory. The audacious commander frequently argued for bold advances, seeking to exploit weaknesses and maintain pressure on the retreating enemy. The methodical commander, however, cautioned against overextension, emphasizing the importance of maintaining logistics, supporting flanks, and consolidating gains. Their debates, conducted in headquarters and over radio communications, reflected the ongoing tension between speed and caution. Despite occasional friction, both approaches were crucial to the overall success of the Allied campaign. The audacious advances created momentum, disrupted German defensive planning, and seized critical objectives. The methodical consolidation ensured that gains were held, supply lines were protected, and forces were prepared for counterattacks. Together, these strategies exemplified the complex interplay between aggressive initiative and disciplined planning in modern warfare. Soldiers on the ground bore the consequences of these decisions, often operating in extreme conditions, facing exhaustion, and navigating the chaos of battle. As the Allies advanced into late 1944, the Battle of the Ardennes presented a new challenge. The audacious commander's forces were deployed to respond swiftly to the German offensive, executing rapid maneuvers to stabilize the front and prevent a breakthrough. His ability to coordinate movement under pressure, redirect units, and maintain operational tempo became legendary. Meanwhile, the methodical commander provided support, ensuring that positions were held, reinforcements arrived on schedule, and enemy advances were contained. The combination of speed and stability ultimately blunted the German offensive and preserved the integrity of the Allied front. By early 1945, the German army was in retreat across multiple fronts. The audacious commander continued to push forward, crossing rivers, capturing cities, and pressing the enemy toward defeat. The methodical commander advanced simultaneously, ensuring that liberated areas were secured and that forces remained coordinated. For the final stages of the campaign, both commanders demonstrated leadership under immense pressure. Yet the public perception increasingly favored the audacious style, associating rapid, visible successes with effective command. The rivalry, however, left lasting lessons for military strategy. Rapid, aggressive action could yield spectacular results, but without support and consolidation, it risked creating vulnerabilities. Conversely, methodical planning ensured stability, but could be criticized for a perceived lack of initiative. The integration of both approaches ultimately proved essential, demonstrating that strategic success depended on balance, adaptability, and the complementary strengths of different leadership styles. By the conclusion of the European campaign, the audacious commander had established a reputation for bold, decisive action, often achieving remarkable territorial gains in record time. The methodical commander maintained a reputation for disciplined planning, thorough preparation, and the ability to coordinate large-scale operations with minimal error. History would remember both, each representing a different approach to command and strategy. The audacious commander's legacy inspired aggressive operational thinking, while the methodical commander's work highlighted the importance of structure, foresight, and reliability in large-scale warfare. The campaign, in its entirety, demonstrated the profound impact of leadership, decision-making, and personal rivalry on military outcomes. Soldiers' lives were shaped by the choices of their commanders, the speed of advance, and the meticulousness of planning. Victories were achieved, yet at a cost, and both commanders' reputations were forever linked to the campaigns they led. Their contrasting styles provided a study in leadership under pressure, illustrating the balance between audacity and caution that defines effective command. In conclusion, the story of these commanders serves as a timeless lesson. Boldness and meticulousness, when combined, create the potential for extraordinary success. Personal rivalries may color perceptions and influence decisions, but the integration of diverse leadership approaches is often the key to achieving decisive results. The campaigns in Sicily, Normandy, and beyond remain testaments to strategic innovation, courage, and the enduring complexity of warfare. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the past. Your support helps us bring more detailed, engaging historical content every week.